I wish all the knowledge and information on a given subject would just hold still. Then all the cars could be tuned up just as they were decades ago. The skill once learned would still be useful. I could believe that my political party was still what it was 2 decades ago. How does a practicing Christian deal with a Jesus who is the same yesterday, today, and forever? We read this in Hebrews 13:8. After decades of Christian practice, is the only reality that doesn't change Jesus. This is The Practicing Christian, and this week's report is entitled, Yes, I'm Ignorant. Way back when, if you got a cut on a surface infection, you learned that mercurochrome would be a good thing to put on it. Iodine if it were a serious wound. Now, I know that iodine is good, sometimes. And I've learned that mercurochrome never was any good to begin with. I couldn't even begin to say which antibiotic now is best. I knew that a year ago, but that changed. A few days ago, I could have said, sure, if you asked me about doing business with the Silicon Valley Bank. Sure, that was a good idea. The Holy Trinity may well not have changed ever. As Hebrews 13:8 notes, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But his agents on planet Earth don't hold still any better than the banks or the first aid treatments. This year, we have one United Methodist Church. It's cutting itself in two, and next year or so, we'll have a United Methodist Church and a World Methodist Community. As far as I can tell, the WMC will have the more traditional approaches to sexuality, ministry, and such, and may be checking out what the Bible has to say on other issues more than does the UMC. That could still leave us up the creek without a paddle. This morning I was checking out what one large Christian denomination had to say about souls and hell and the cross and other subjects. What they were like from a strictly biblical analysis and recording historical usages of the church. Well, among other differences, they seem to have proven for themselves that Jesus never hung on a cross. Rather, it was a single, long stake with no crossbar, and the cross idea only came into vogue in the 300s. But that book was 46 years old. Maybe that's all been revised. There's certainly been no lack of speculators in our world. Regarding creation, speculation began in Egypt at about 2700 BC. By 430 BC, Empedocles in Greece was listing the order of creation events and the times that they would have taken to accomplish. Da Vinci and Francis of Assisi were writing variations on it as having been more involved than Genesis hints at. Darwin was a latecomer. I suspect that a century or two from now, the debates will still continue with new categories to deal with. There are two suggestions for the practicing Christian to deal with this lack of stability in things. The first is to focus on what is the core or center of one's faith. For example, I know a group of young men who are connected with churches that have varying ideas of when Jesus will return to earth. Many people argue, study, and worry about the dating of this yet-to-occur event. I take that back. There are those who believe, or did believe, that he already has come back. Jehovah's Witnesses announced that he returned sometime around the First World War, but chooses to remain there and contemplate us from the stratosphere. I don't know how widespread this teaching is these days among the witnesses. I have heard them teach this, but that's a while back. At any rate, my point is to focus on the most important elements of a question. In this instance, what will his resurrection kingdom be like, and how may we prepare to enter into it joyously, be part of it? I don't care that much about what happens. I do have an interest in being there, and by my faith being welcomed there. God created us and our world and is building his kingdom. Good. We can get into the details later. The second point is to focus on the center of the concept or event. God created us and our world and is building this kingdom. Good. We can get into the details later. Was Jesus murdered on a cross or a long stake? It's a mildly interesting question, but of less significance to us than how he gave his life in obedience to his Father for us. It also seems to me that my attitude towards other Christians and their convictions and understandings of Christian truth needs to remain as charitable as possible. I don't drink alcohol that often, but I have worshiped, talked with, worked with, and enjoyed the friendship of perhaps thousands of men and women who did not use it themselves, believed it to be ungodly, and who were convinced that Jesus made not wine, but grape juice that day in Cana. I have always tried to present myself to these good people without scorn, rancor, or pity, which come so easily to many of us when coming into contact with differently believing Christians. In our complex world, people have come into some degree of knowledge of God from greatly diverse ways. Reading about him in a library, learning in their family, having a friend who taught them, and who taught us, and how much, and so forth. Well, listening to an atheist and wondering. And we in turn must go easy with people we're getting to know. They have so many different backgrounds of having become Christian. They may or may not even have heard of the basics of our faith. Don't argue. Don't fuss. But do be encouraging, always. Use prayer to help them get further into the Word and into Christ. Help them to share books that have helped you. Many people are like workers in a sophisticated high-end boatyard, but whose background was building wooden canoes in Minnesota. Go easy with them. Lord, yes, I'm ignorant. Help my lack of knowledge. May I always find it tied to wisdom. May I also be ready to discover that what I learned to help correct my ignorance might itself be displaced by new discoveries. Remember also that many events in your own life where you've been touched or guided by God can also be good to share with others. You are indeed part of the long Christian story, and your testimony can be of help to others. There are many books that try to answer Christians' questions definitively. I suggest that you not try to find the, quote, right, close quote, one. Rather, look for one written by people in your own Christian community, Baptist, Catholic, Episcopal, so forth. For then you will get a better idea of how people like those with whom you worship think. You may pursue questions of fact more effectively among your co-religionists. You may also find that you have much to learn from their faith and their Christian experience. Serve then, be the King's right arm.